Padme Amidala is one of the most integral players in the Republic and played one of the most significant roles over the course of the Clone War, serving as a sort of unofficial liaison between the government at the time and the Jedi Order. While the Jedi Order were on the front lines of the conflict against the Separatists, they were largely shut out of the political discussions, and this led to the immense discourse between the political narrative and the war and the soldiers on the battlefield. Throughout the war, Padme often served as an advocate and a voice for the Jedi Council, as well as a mediator for the Jedi and the Senate, being that the Jedi had very little representation, if any, within the Senate itself. As Padme is a strong-willed and devoted negotiator, her reputation in the Senate is incredibly admirable, and her relationship with Anakin Skywalker was one of the most closely guarded secrets on Coruscant. Despite not having a place in the heat of battle, she was an incredibly dangerous political enemy and very skilled debater, which obviously made her a target. In the waning days of the war and during the rise of the Empire, her willpower and strength of character was not enough to save her, as she met her end after being betrayed by Anakin and dying during childbirth, an event that had been foretold during Anakin's visions. While the circumstances regarding her death were vague, there seems to be a rampant misunderstanding surrounding this scene that is not truly indicative of how Padme really lost her life, as there appears to be more to the story, and Padme may not actually have died as a result of childbirth. So stick with us today, Acolytes of the Galaxy, and let's dive into how Padme really died, and address the misconception that many fans have about this point in Star Wars lore that seems to be a disservice to such a compelling character. After being assessed by medical droids under the care of Obi-Wan and Yoda, the medical unit explains that she is perfectly healthy, but yet for some reason is dying, with again the medical droids not being able to explain this away at all. They are losing her. This has led many to believe that Padme died of a broken heart, or rather died simply of sadness after being betrayed by Anakin, which is not entirely the case. This misunderstanding stems from the dialogue on Mustafar when Padme confronts Anakin before his climactic duel and ultimate defeat at the hands of Obi-Wan Kenobi, resulting in his severe burns and the near loss of his life, which directly plays into what actually happened that fateful day when Padme died. The canon reason for Padme's death is actually much darker than simply dying of a broken heart, if one can believe that. The canonical explanation for how Padme died was that she had her life force drained by Palpatine in order to prolong Vader's own life long enough to be encased in his new combat suit. Her death was not the result of sadness nor a broken heart, but was actually an act of force manipulation by Palpatine that allowed him to use force healing on Vader at the expense of Padme. Seeing as droids are not force sensitive, they have no actual way of assessing what the true problem was with Padme, and this led to their complete misunderstanding and inability to do anything about it. This directly explains why they were unable to figure out what was really happening with her, let alone save her life, as they were unable to actually get to the root of the problem. To them, it simply appeared as if she was losing the will to live, and she was quickly dying despite no physical signs that this should have been the case. What was happening in actuality was that the Emperor was siphoning her life force energy and using it to feed into Vader for a very few different reasons, and to the droids this was completely undetectable. The first reason that the Emperor elected to do this was simply that he needed to ensure that Vader survived long enough for his life support systems in his suit to sustain him, and to do this he needed to temporarily sustain him by using Padme's own life at the cost of her death. This not only ensured Vader's survival, but in specifically choosing Padme, he was able to further his own agenda in burgeoning days of the new Empire with Vader and without a loved one, and set the pieces in place for decades of manipulation. This act ensured Padme's death, as Palpatine willingly killed her in order to save Anakin. And it also means that Palpatine was not technically lying when he said that Vader killed her, seeing as he quite literally took her life to save his own, despite not knowing it. In making sure that Padme died, he was able to kill much of Vader's attachment to his old life, and freed his anger and rage, augmenting his strength in the dark side, and strengthening his position as a fierce Sith Lord, one bound to Palpatine. Now armed with the rage at the thought that he had killed his own wife, Vader could now carry with him freely this pain on his escapades throughout the galaxy, channeling his hatred and his suffering in order to slaughter Jedi Knights by the dozens, and purge the galaxy of the once great and powerful Jedi Order. Seeing fans misinterpret this event as being caused by simply sadness is tragic, albeit an often unintentional instance of disrespecting a character that is known to be incredibly headstrong in the Clone War, as Padme is very unlikely to give up in this scenario, especially now since she has children, relegating her to more of a joke than a true representation of what the character was meant to be. At the same time, making her death far more tragic, being it at the hand of Vader indirectly, and adding more to the grand plan of Palpatine. We can also see this tragedy mirrored in the sequel trilogy, as the event finally comes full circle and is done justice after far too long. The ability to save and preserve life was the single power that Vader saw above all else in order to specifically save Padme from the fate that he foresaw all those years ago. In the sequel trilogy, we see another instance of Palpatine unlocking the key to using the Force in order to create and preserve life. Only this time, the talent is properly passed down to a representative of the Skywalker bloodline in order to utilize on his own instead of being withheld from him. We are of course talking about Ben Solo. In the prequels, Palpatine promised to showcase the power to Vader, tempting him into embracing the dark side, and as a result of the Jedi's own hubris and refusal to teach him how to properly handle the situation, Vader embraced this promise and turned to Sidious full-heartedly. This allows only for the tragic irony of Palpatine taking Padme's life in order to force heal Vader instead. But in the sequels, Ben Solo is able to finally achieve the ability to save those that he cares about, albeit at the expense of his own life. As George Lucas himself has stated, each entry into Star Wars is like poetry in that it rhymes. This not only adds an incredible amount of depth and tragedy to Padme's death, but also explains away one of the most unnerving moments in the prequels, and a moment that has largely been overshadowed in recent years due to a common misunderstanding by fans about Padme's actual death. But anyway, my friends, what do you think of this explanation? Does this seem like a reasonable explanation for how Padme truly died? And do you think that this helps to mitigate some of the jokes that people have made about Padme and dying of a broken heart? As always, my friends, thank you guys so much for watching the channel. May the Force be with you, and I hope you have a great day.